Hello, welcome to my channel. These days it's uh, hard to find anyone who is not familiar with tools like ChatGPT or Gemini. Non-technology users might not realize or use the terms like LLM, generative AI, but the familiarity and the usage of these tools is very, very high. And when it comes to power users, like corporations dealing with IT systems, there has been a consistent push towards the adaptation of artificial intelligence and the application of generative AI in specific. Now that brings up an interesting question. Should we be using generative AI and machine learning in pretty much everything that we do in the IT space? I'm a huge fan of artificial intelligence, and I've acquired a lot of certifications like AWS machine learning specialty and in the Azure space as well. Not for the sake of my career progression, but I'm genuinely, truly interested in the idea of artificial intelligence, and I personally believe that it's a huge leap for the mankind, not just for the IT sector itself. So my interest is in the areas of AI safety and AI governance. Um, I'm familiar with ML algorithms and things like that, but I also feel, and I also kind of think that AI governance, AI safety is also of immense importance. Now, that also leads to another topic of interest to me, which is the applicability of generative AI. And that is the primary focus of this topic. Now, like I was saying, should we be using artificial intelligence, generative AI, or machine learning in everything that we work on in the IT space? In my view, heuristics versus artificial intelligence. In a lot of cases, simple heuristics are enough for the problem at hand. And the application of generative AI can be an overkill. Now, what factors should one take into consideration? One is the complexity and the variability, and I can think of the ambiguity, the level of ambiguity associated with the problem at hand. So these factors should be taken into consideration before deciding whether to go towards heuristics or generative AI. Now, in a nutshell, what sort of problems are suitable for the application of heuristics? If the problem is simple, well-defined, and repetitive in nature, now that suits the application of heuristics. And the generative AI is best suited for problems where there is complexity involved, and they are language heavy, and there is a high degree of variability involved in the problem definition. It is also far more important because not just the social media or the corporations, but even the stock market seems to be rewarding companies that are adopting or associating themselves with the artificial intelligence. Just recently, one of the top IT Indian companies, their stock went up 3% when they announced an association with one of the leading LLM providers. So it is in this context, it is far more important to evaluate properly in depth whether to even apply artificial intelligence, and afterwards look into AI safety and AI governance. So in this video, I will get into more details about applicability of heuristics and artificial intelligence. When you would go for one over the other, and towards the end, I will also get into details of what sort of decision criteria should one take to go one way or the other, whether to apply artificial intelligence or to go with heuristics. And let's dive deep into the video now.
Now let us take a look at what heuristics are versus generative AI. Heuristics are rule-based shortcuts or simple logic designed by humans. They are predictable and deterministic. They are cheaper to implement and easy to maintain, and they are much faster compared to a generative AI or an ML machine learning algorithm. A typical example of heuristic, what it would look like is if email contains unsubscribe, the text unsubscribe in it, then mark it as marketing email. In contrast, a generative AI is a large language model trained on huge data sets. I mean, we are all familiar with OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Gemini from Google. These LLMs are trained on massive amounts of data. They understand the context and generate responses. They're flexible. They can handle a variety of more complex problems, more versatile problem space they can handle, but they are computationally expensive. For example, it's an LLM reading an entire email and classifying its intent and tone. So let's take a look at one example where generative AI is an overkill. And the problem is detect if a password is strong or not. A typical heuristic solution would look like something along the lines of if length is greater than or equal to 12, if it contains uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, something like that. If all those conditions are met, then classify that password as a strong password. And this works perfectly well. In this context, using generative AI would cost more, it will be slower, it adds to the complexity, and does not improve accuracy in a meaningful way. So definitely in this case, heuristics win. Now let's take a look at another example. This is where one would start with heuristics and gradually move towards the application of generative AI and machine learning algorithms as the complexity of the problem space increases. It's a very natural transformation that pretty much we all have been through. We might not have paid attention to it, but this is something we all have been through, this transformation. And this is spam filtering. In early systems, what happened was we used simple systems. And early systems, they would use simple heuristics, like if the subject contains free money, things like that, and if the email has more than 3 links, and if the sender domain is suspicious, in that case that email would get labeled as spam. These rules filtered 80 to 90% of the spam. And today machine learning is used because the spammers have evolved. They are using more sophisticated techniques, and messages became more subtle, and patterns became more complex. So this is an example where we moved from heuristics to machine learning because the complexity increased. And then we'll take a look at another example where definitely the application of generative AI makes perfect sense. If we take a customer support chat application, a chat bot as an example, if user says refund, that exact phrase, then a chatbot based on heuristics, it would just show the refund policy. But would that be the case in real world scenario? It might not be the case. So a typical user, they may say things like, I want my money back, instead of saying refund or show me the refund policy, something like that. They might say, I want my money back, or the product is worthless, is useless. How do I cancel my purchase? Or this is just a waste of my time, my money, right? So there isn't anything specific. These are the few phrases that pretty much all customers would use. There isn't anything like that. It's free form text, and it could be expressed in any format. Now, all of a sudden, heuristics quickly explode into hundreds of rules. Now, in this case, generative AI handles this complexity naturally. So, in this case, uh, the application of generative AI or machine learning makes perfect sense. Now, in terms of an engineering principle, if we were to come up with one, the classic engineering principle I would say is many engineers would follow: start with heuristics and move to AI only when rules are not sufficient anymore or they start to break. And the reasons are: it's cheaper to go with heuristics, and it's easier to debug. And like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this presentation, heuristics are predictable and they're more deterministics. So the predictable behavior is an advantage, and they are easier to explain. These are some of the advantages of going with the heuristics, but as the complexity of the problem space increases, one would go towards artificial intelligence in a more natural way. It makes sense as well. Now let's take a look at a real world. It's a famous real world example that I've come across, I believe, a couple of weeks ago when I was going through an article somewhere. It's in the space of autonomous driving. What happened was companies initially tried AI for everything, and then later many realized and they added hard heuristics for safety. It looked something like, if obstacle distance is less than 1 meter, then stop immediately. So you do not rely on AI predictions for critical safety logic. So it has to happen pretty fast. So what is one simple decision rule to go towards heuristics or generative AI? The idea is, use heuristics when problem rules are clear, there are few edge cases, high reliability needed, and speed matters, like we talked about the autonomous driving space. And use generative AI when language or perception is involved and rules explode combinatorially, like we talked about the customer support chatbot. That's one good example of this rule. And then patterns are hard to specify, and moreover, ambiguity exists. In those cases, it makes sense to go with a generative AI solution. So, based on all these factors, in summary, we can say that yes, the current hype sometimes leads people to apply generative AI when simple heuristics would work better. So it's more fashionable. That's the term I'd like to use. Instead of using the word hype, I'm more comfortable using the word fashionable, because what I see in the industry is it's more fashionable to propose a solution and I'm an architect. I've been one, pretty much for a long time. I've always been technical, always been passionate towards architecture because I look at architecture as a skill. It's not something, it's a routine work. You look at every problem in isolation and you come up with a solution that suits the particular problem definition, satisfying the business requirements and also the non-functionals. That's where architecture is so attractive to me. So these days, when I talk to people, what I see is it's more fashionable to propose a solution that has, let's say, the application of generative AI as much as possible, and NoSQL versus RDBMS, and yeah, I mean, microservices is one example. Let's go with the microservices, NoSQL, and apply machine learning algorithms as much as possible. This sort of combination is more fashionable these days. But what I'd say is it's ideal if the problem space is suitable for the application of these tools, then we should definitely go for it. And to make a decision whether to go with not just generative AI, machine learning versus heuristics, but RDBMS versus NoSQL. Even within NoSQL, would you want to go with something like Cassandra versus Couchbase? When would you want to go with one over the other? These are some things one has to have a much deeper understanding of these technologies and how the combinations would work, and also have thorough understanding of the problem domain. And also when it comes to microservices, should we always be going towards microservices? One clear disadvantage is it forces one to look towards distributed transactions, transactions spanning across multiple microservices, and in-process calls become network calls. I mean, does the situation, the problem at hand, justify these tools, or will those tools be an overkill? This is something an architect has to take into consideration before proposing a solution. The best system in practice, in my view, often combines heuristics, machine learning, and generative AI, each used where it fits best. That's my take. Thank you so very much for staying with me on this video.